Nicole Vermeulen. So Nicole has over 15 years of commercial and international experience in different parts of the energy sector, such as utility, renewable, solar and wind, and oil and gas. She has delivered projects up to $2 billion in challenging and complex environments, including acquisition and integration projects. Currently, she is the supply chain manager of green hydrogen in Shell and responsible for contracting and procurement of one of the largest planned green hydrogen plants worldwide. With its commitment to achieving net zero greenhouse emission by 2050 or sooner, Shell is initiating a myriad of green energy projects and initiatives across the whole value chain. So Nicole will give us an overview of different technologies in hydrogen productions, pros and cons, where the hydrogen market is heading, and why green hydrogen. Nicole, it is my pleasure to bring you on stage. Please take over from here.
Yeah, thank you, Oksana. That was a nice introduction. So I'm just going to try to share my screen. Give me 1 second. And I hope that you can see it by now. So thanks. So indeed, I'm working for Shell in the renewable energy business, and one of my key focus areas is on the Holland Hydrogen project in the port of Rotterdam, which I will share a bit more information about later on. It's one of the largest currently planned. So before that, we have always this note. It's too small to read probably, but basically it says that please do not make any investment decisions based on the presentation that I'm sharing. So some cautious note in advance. And then into the content. So the different colors of hydrogen, there's a lot of talk about that, and I assume most people know, but just to start it off, to place it all in the context. So the colors of hydrogen are linked to how it's actually produced. So most of it, so let's say 99% currently, is produced by the fossil fuels, and that is the so-called gray hydrogen. And in order for us to decarbonize, we want to change the colors. So we want to move from gray to other colors. And when we capture the CO2 produced by the hydrogen, we speak about blue hydrogen. And when we speak about green hydrogen, then it's actually produced by electrolysis. So that means that water is split by renewable electricity into water into hydrogen and to oxygen. So blue and green hydrogen can replace the gray hydrogen that is used today. And it can also be used as a fuel for electricity and transport, as well as in the heavy industry. So ultimately, when we want to meet net zero, we aim to have the green hydrogen, of course, but in the road to get there, there are more technologies needed that will need to play a role aside from only green hydrogen. And generally, hydrogen plays a major role in the energy transition, as I'm sure that most people have heard about by now. So that means that new value chains will be needed. So we need to do this all together, and collaboration is key. So there's basically no single company that can do this alone. So it's the customers, the manufacturers, the regulation is also, as Steven mentioned before, the infrastructures, the producers, everybody needs to work together on this. And at this stage, I think the world can also not afford to pick just one technology. So we need to work on multiple options to see what will be the winning solution going forward. So there is a lot of buzz around the green hydrogen. I think when you follow the news, it's constantly there. I think there's basically daily announcements, and I've just randomly picked some snippets in there. So it's difficult to distinguish really what's going on. So by now, over 40 countries have published hydrogen strategies. And they're all in different ways, right? They are more or less detailed and specific, but I think it's a good start. It started all with Japan, and by now also Germany, Australia, and others have made major steps forward. And if you look at the publications of the International Energy Agency, they have indicated that currently around 350 projects are under development, and that could bring up the capacity to 54 gigawatts by 2030. So that's a lot. That's a lot. There's a lot of plans made, but the big question is, of course, what will happen, and how do you distinguish which project will actually be built and which ones will not? That probably depends on a few key drivers, and that is when the incentives are clear. So that means if there's a high carbon price, if it's the country has a net zero ambition, as well as the willingness to maintain the heavy industry within the country. I think these are the key elements to probably determine if it's going to happen or not. And the overarching driver here is decarbonization. So that means not deindustrialization, actually, because there needs to be a need still there. And then there's hydrogen that can play a very important role. And aside from that, also the ecosystem behind it is really important. As you can imagine, each country is very different. Like, for example, Australia is very fortunate to have an abundance of energy, such as solar and wind, whereas the UK might be focused a little bit more on blue hydrogen at this moment. So each country will pick a different journey to meet its decarbonization targets. So how is Shell then actually advancing its hydrogen strategy? So we are recognizing 4 steps in the development of hydrogen. And the first step is close to home. Here we are converting some of the gray hydrogen in our refineries, and that is being turned into green hydrogen. So that would be through electrolysis on our own premises. An example of this one is a project that we have in Refine. So that is a refinery close to Cologne in Germany. And there we have commissioned over summer the largest European PEM electrolyzer of 10 megawatts. Just for your information, the largest one exists currently worldwide is 20 megawatts, which is in Canada. And we're also intending to expand this one of 10 megawatts to 100 megawatts in time at the Rhineland site. And the green hydrogen that is being produced there is used also in the refinery for decarbonization. The second step will be to scale up to the hundreds of megawatts, and that is the so-called serving the hubs. And the offtake there will be for our own sites and for mobility. And there the difference is also that those electrolyzer plants will be built off-site, so not on our own sites. So an example there is the Rotterdam electrolyzer project. So that is called the Holland Hydrogen 1 project. That is going to be 200 megawatts. So I will go a little bit more detail in the next slide, but just here to give you an overview of how the development works. And the third step would be to not have only one site and one customer, but to have a cluster or an industrial ecosystem. So then you will have multiple customers. And again, this would be in the hundreds or maybe even gigawatt scale. You will need to have pipelines and a backbone in place. And well, this really is like $1 billion, billions of dollars investment. So a large scale. And then the final step will be to go also to the import and the export over long distances. And there you will really have this integrated green hydrogen system in different parts of the world where it's going to be needed. Yeah, let me move on to the project specifically. So that is the Holland Hydrogen project, which is going to be a 200 megawatt plant that we're planning in the port of Rotterdam. We want to create a green hydrogen hub there together with other partners as well. And we aim to produce the green hydrogen there on the so-called Tweede Maasvlakte, where we'll use the green electricity, which will come from wind power. And this wind farm is actually an offshore wind farm that we're developing together with Nicole in a consortium. And that is planned to be operational, let's say, in 2023. For this plant, we aim to take FID early next year. And then it should be operational as well, let's say, in 2023, 2024. And generally speaking, the Netherlands is working quite hard to increase the amount of renewable power generation, which is needed to feed into all these electrolyzer plants that are being planned. For example, by building these offshore wind farms on a large scale. And for that, the Netherlands is also quite well positioned to be, for example, a hydrogen hub in Northwest Europe, because it has the location, it has the offshore wind capacity, or at least the sources to build it there, as well as a good transport network of the gas pipelines that can be reused for this. So generally, green hydrogen is, well, it can play a really important role in the decarbonization of the industry, especially because there currently gray hydrogen is used there to a large extent. So if we can replace this by the green hydrogen, that contributes then to the decarbonization of the energy systems. And of course, the second important use will be for the heavy-duty transport. Port of Rotterdam, they actually intending there a 2 gigawatt conversion park. And in this plot, we intend as Shell to build a 200 megawatt electrolyzer plant, where I said it will have a capacity of 200 megawatts, which is 20 times bigger as the one that we just commissioned, and 10 times bigger as the one existing worldwide. So that should produce then, let's say, about 50 to 60,000 kilos of hydrogen per day. And that will initially be used to decarbonize our refinery in Pernis. So that's the largest refinery in Rotterdam we have. And that should save us around 200,000 tons of CO2 per year. For mobility, if you want to convert it to that, that would mean around 2,300 of hydrogen trucks that can be running each day on this. So a project like this, where you are really scaling up and still in front of the market, has many challenges. And one of them is the scaling up to this size within this given time frame, because that means that also currently the supply chain doesn't exist yet to this scale. So that also is still being developed as we speak. So we're working really closely with the market, various players, and also different electrolyzer manufacturers to really assess and de-risk the technology solution for our Rotterdam project to scale it up to the 200 megawatt. And from this one, this will actually be a stepping stone towards the North H2 project. Earlier last year, there was an announcement made that Shell, together with a few consortium partners, so that is, for example, Gasunie, Groningen Seaport, and Equinor, to have one of the largest green hydrogen projects in Europe. That is going to be built in the north of the Netherlands, where we envision to also feed in by large offshore wind farms for the electricity. And that should gradually grow to around 10 gigawatts by 2040. So that is a huge step up again. And that should be, that should be one of the biggest ones probably planned at this stage. So going forward with this and summarizing, and also hinting a little bit back to what Stefan said earlier. So developing such a large scale of projects, you have so many challenges and risks on the business case. And if you summarize this down to the key challenges that we see here, it's that it's a very nascent hydrogen market still. So it's difficult at this stage to really generate enough demand to really support the project. So demand is on one side a key issue. On the other side, technology-wise, so also no hydrogen production to this scale has been done yet on this stage. So we're also still developing there. And then, of course, the lack of a regulatory framework. So there is a lack of regulations, there's a lack of codes and of standards, including, for example, the safety protocols to govern how the hydrogen is being transferred. So there's still a lot of work to be done here. Also, still today, it's very expensive to go big with the current cost structure. And as hinted towards before as well, the supply chain at this stage is also not ready yet for this scale up. So that means like the manufacturing capacity of these electrolyzer vendors, the raw materials that you will need for this, but also the integrated systems with the balance of the plant together with this electrolyzer plant. So these are all still key elements to work on. So if I can give a main message here, I think that the most important part is that we all need to work together in this full value chain to make this happen. This is not a one company can do this, or just one government. So it's everybody working together towards this same goal. So I hope to have been able to share a little bit more insights on what we're doing here in this green hydrogen space. But of course, if there's any questions, then please let me know, and also don't hesitate to reach out to me afterwards if you like.
Nicole, we actually had quite a lot of questions from the audience, really good questions. So,
good.
So one of the questions is, when do you think hydrogen power will become economically viable?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I think that's one of the key points at this moment, right? So there's a few elements to this. So if you look at the hydrogen cost at this stage, you have the OPEX cost. So that is the green electricity. So the costs there need to come down. And that is one big part of it. The other part is the CAPEX. So that is the cost of basically the electrolyzer plant as well as the integrated system. Those costs also need to come down. And hopefully that will happen while we scale up and the demand is growing bigger. But on the other hand, you will also need to make sure that the alternative to the green hydrogen becomes more expensive, so that it becomes actually more competitive in the end of the day. And thirdly, if countries are able to import the energy, then the infrastructure needs to be in place, and I think that will also help this business case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Another question we'll have here. What is your advice for developing countries like Indonesia with limitations of budget to develop the hydrogen ecosystem effectively?
Yeah, so that
without budget had to do without budget is how I had to do, right?
Yes, I'm also thinking about this. So I think you always need to have an investor to go there, and indeed, but it helps if you have a good subsidy climate, of course, at this stage still.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so yes, it's a tough question, right? To do something with nothing. So now, so blue or green?
I think that's the ever recurring question, right? Is it going to be blue or is it going to be green? And it's kind of like this polarization questions, like either or. And maybe at this stage, and it's kind of how I started the presentation, I don't think it's the time yet to make this choice at this stage yet. Because in order to have the green hydrogen, which I think ultimately is everybody's goal to achieve, you need to have sufficient green electricity available. And for that, you really need to have enough wind power, solar power, etc. And I think if the demand now is increasing for this green hydrogen or hydrogen in general, there is just not enough available yet. So I think in this meantime, you will probably need to have the blue hydrogen in the meantime as well, while you're ramping up the green part as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another very good question. You actually did very well in kind of sticking to time. So we actually have time for questions with you. So will electric or hydrogen vehicle win?
It's again a bit of this polarization question. And I think for this one, it's a bit of the similar answer. So maybe here it's also not either or, but you need to ask yourself what you will be looking at. So, for example, the range of distance that you want to achieve here is going to be very important for your choice, but also, for example, the fueling time. Right, there's a big difference if you want to charge with electricity or if you're going to fuel it with hydrogen, which can be a matter of minutes. So I think these type of questions become important for what you're going to be using it for eventually. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for connecting with us here today. Fantastic, really interesting presentation. I hope our audience also enjoyed it. I think they did because they asked a lot of questions. I would love to go through all of them, but we need to keep to time and we're already a little bit late with our schedule. So thank you so much, Nicole. Really appreciate
it. Was my pleasure. Thank you very much.